Have you noticed how online, whenever someone asks what watercolor pencils are best, people will say Derwent Inktense or Faber Castell Albrecht Dürer. And this is why I've organized a little tournament, and I'm going to use them both in the same painting and compare them at each stage. These are the sets that I own. So this is the Derwent Inktense, and I have 72 watercolor pencils, and this one is Faber Castell Albrecht Dürer, and in this one there's 60 watercolor pencils. As far as the cost goes, they're pretty similar. If you look on Amazon, you'll see that one Derwent Inktense pencil is an average of $1.42, and one Faber Castell Albrecht Dürer pencil ranges between $1.25 to $1.46 per pencil. And I guess it's going to depend on the set that you buy and on the website you do it on. And according to what I'm seeing, you can get up to 72 colors of the Derwent Inktense watercolor pencils, and that's exactly what I have here. And then for Albrecht Dürer, you can get so many more, 120 colors. One of the main things about the Derwent Inktense is that it's ink-based, and it says here ink pencils. Faber Castell, on the other hand, is watercolor, and on the website, the properties seem to be pretty similar to the Derwent Inktense. So that's vibrant colors, they layer easily, all that kind of stuff. And that's why comparing them is going to be so interesting. So quickly, we're going to look at what they look like on paper when you color with them. So that's the Derwent. Pretty creamy. And this is the Faber Castell Albrecht Dürer. And it feels a little harder, but still creamy enough that it's easy to color with. So now I'm just gonna activate the paint. I see there are marks, but so it's not bad. There's almost no pencil lines left here. And now with Faber Castell, okay, it's way easier to remove all the pencil lines right away with this one. There's one thing you might have heard about the Derwent Inktense is that they don't lift very easy when they're dry, because they're ink and not watercolor, so they behave differently, and we're gonna test that. I'm gonna dry the colors first, and now with a wet brush, I'm gonna try and lift color, see if it works. So that's the Derwent Inktense, and it actually works. And it's funny because looking at the Derwent website, they're saying that those pencils are permanent when they're dry, and they don't wash out like watercolor, which actually they do a little bit, I find. So now let's see what Faber Castell is doing. Yeah, those are a lot easier to lift for sure. But still, I think they behave pretty similarly. So that's something to keep in mind. So the next step is going to be to pick the colors and see what's going to match for this painting. I'm going to start with Faber Castell since I have less colors in this one. Since I've made a color chart for both sets, I think it'll be easy, hopefully. And just looking at the colors, they're so much more intense as the name indicates. So that's going to be a challenge, I think. I think I did a pretty good job. Just this color is a little bit off, but I couldn't really get anything better. Something that I've noticed before, and it's even more apparent now that I'm comparing the Derwent Inktense with the Faber Castell Albrecht Dürer, is that in this Derwent set, the lead color doesn't really match what you see up here. An example of how strange the Derwent Inktense are when you look at the lead color is this one, for instance, that's actually called mustard, and it looks like a greenish type of color, and when you lay down on paper, it's more like this color. It really doesn't have anything to do with the lead, so be very careful about that. And I find that the Faber Castell for this is a lot more consistent with the colors, so it's not as tricky. I'm getting ready to film, as you can see from what's behind me, and as always I'm a little bit nervous, first of all because I'm tackling a portrait, and also because I don't know if both type of pencils are going to match and what this is going to look like, so we'll see. I got the sketch ready, so usually what I'll do is just freehand everything. This time I wanted to make sure I had it right, so I took some measurements just to make sure. A portrait is going to give us a better overview of how these pencils compare, because there are a lot of techniques that we can use in a portrait and a lot of details. So far, I really like how the Derwent Inktense feels like on paper. I think it's really easy to color with. And I'm also noticing that the white watercolor pencil is so creamy that it really helps to blend colors really well. Because here I'm going for a pastel purple, and I can feel that this pencil is going to help me get the actual color and soften the vibrancy of the original purple. I already know that with a dry up pencil, this would be harder to achieve, and I kind of wonder what the Albrecht Dürer are going to be like for this. With Faber Castell Albrecht Dürer, I can see that the pigment comes a little bit less easily than the Derwent, and the lead feels more robust, but it's still easy to color with, so there's not a problem with that. I think this type of pencil is going to be maybe better for details. We'll see that at the end. I really was expecting for the white pencil to be less easy to blend with, but it's actually not the case, so that's a good thing. It's hard to tell for now without the water, but I see slight variations in the colors. I'm really wondering what this is going to look like when we add water, because at this stage in the art, I don't see much else than slight variations in the colors. That's it. Okay, now it's time to activate the paint. And right away, I can tell you I am struck with the intensity of the Derwent Inktense pencils. I knew that already, but it's really beautiful. I even think that I could stop here, not even add a second layer. I mean, you just leave it as it is and it's already great. I don't really know what's up with that weird greenish color. I think I got it by mixing that raw umber color with blue or maybe purple. Not sure. Then I guess we'll use the second layer later to fix that. That's okay. So you can see here I'm trying to lift color and it's working well, just like we saw earlier. I'd say at this point, the only thing that really bums me out with the Inktense watercolor pencils is that texture that you can't really remove completely. I guess it has charm, but I also like my art to be really smooth. So as you can clearly see, I think in the video, the Faber Castell Albrecht Dürer are a lot less pigmented. Oh, one thing I really love here is the hair. I love that there's absolutely no texture showing if I don't want it to. Except for the vibrancy so far, I can't really tell a huge difference between both watercolor pencils, except that maybe the Derwent Inktense leave more pencil lines. But when you color, for sure, it's really hard to tell, and it's a little bit more noticeable when you paint. One thing that I love about the Inktense as well is the shadows. You can really get them to be really dark. And at this point, I'm hoping that the second layer will do it for the Albrecht Dürer. I just had to run to school, so now we're gonna go for another round and apply a second layer. I think it's pretty obvious there's a lot of work to do on the nose, on the lips, the eyes, and there's that weird blotch of color here that I don't like at all. So I'm gonna try and fix this in that second layer. You can't really see the vibrancy so well. Shadows are really awesome with Derwent. And I like that there are less pencil lines with Derwent the second time around. So that's a good thing. I wasn't expecting that. The hair still looks a lot better with the Faber Castell Albrecht Dürer than it does with the Inktense. But still, I think that a third layer of Albrecht Dürer would probably be needed to match the vibrancy. I just finished painting that second layer and it's looking pretty good. But now we're going to test those pencils on dry and see how they do with detail. I think for the details, a good thing to do would be to sharpen the pencils, and we'll take advantage of that to see how they do. The Inktense sharpen really well. I hadn't planned on doing this, but I'm using the white pencil right now to actually fix mistakes and add subtle highlights, and it's working so well. It just makes me think of what I used to do when I was into colored pencil. It really works in the same way. And there's that technique with watercolor pencils where you just dip the lead of the watercolor pencil in water and then you can have those sharper highlights thanks to that wet lead. And it's working pretty good with Derwent, as you can see. The Albrecht Dürer sharpened really well too, and I'm not surprised there because they're so robust that I didn't expect any breakage or anything. On details also, I'm not too surprised to find that the Faber Castell Albrecht Dürer are a little more precise. They're really great for fine lines. And I feel like with just coloring on top of those 2 layers that we did, it might be enough to kind of bring a little more intensity. I'm going to use that wet lead technique again here. And it's working just as well as it was with the Inktense. So by now, I think you've noticed how subtle the difference is between the two. They're both really good. I like that the Faber Castell blend a lot better and that the tip is harder. But I love that the Derwent Inktense are so much more intense and they're still very versatile. So I think my preference goes to Inktense overall. There are also great shadows and colors. And even my family actually thought that the left side looked better and I didn't even tell them anything. So let me know what you think and where your preference is in the comments. And to see more watercolor pencil from me, I'll suggest this video next and the whole playlist after that, and I'll link it in the description of the video so you can find it. Thank you for watching and see you next time.